I want you to picture two classrooms, and I want you to listen carefully because from a distance, they sound almost identical. In the first one, the teacher asks a question. Students raise their hands. One student answers. The teacher responds. Another student answers. The teacher responds again. There's energy in the room. Hands are going up. Students are talking. The lesson is moving. And if you walked past the window and glanced in, you would probably think, that is a good math class. Students are engaged. The conversation is flowing. In the second classroom, the teacher poses a problem. Students work quietly for a few minutes, and then one student shares how they approached it. Another student says, I did it differently. Can I show you? And a third student says, wait, I got the same answer, but I'm not sure your strategy always works. Can we test it? The room is slower, more uncertain. There are pauses that feel uncomfortable. And if you walk past the window, you might wonder whether the teacher has lost control of the lesson. Here's what is happening in those two rooms. In the first one, students are talking about mathematics. In the second one, students are doing mathematics. And those are not the same thing. And the classroom that looks more productive from the hallway is almost never the one where the deeper thinking is happening. Welcome to Show Me the Math Receipts. I'm Asali Smith, founder of Number Navigators, and this is episode 15. Today, we're drawing the line between mathematical discussion and mathematical discourse, what they look like, what they sound like, and why the difference between them is one of the most important instructional distinctions in mathematics education. Let's get into it. Over to you, Josh.
It's time for Math Joke of the Day. Don't ever start a conversation with pi, because it will never stop. Ba-dum-bum-ching.
All right. Thanks, Josh. Let's go. So let me be specific about what I mean by the distinction, because this is not a semantic argument. It's an instructional one. Mathematical discussion is what happens when students share answers or report procedures or confirm understanding with a teacher who is evaluating their responses. It is talk that moves through the teacher. The teacher asks, the student responds, the teacher confirms or redirects. It's organized, it's efficient, and it concentrates mathematical authority entirely in the hands of the teacher. The teacher is the one who knows. The students are the ones who report. Mathematical discourse is something different. It is what happens when students examine mathematical ideas together, when they build on each other's thinking, when they push back on each other's reasoning, ask genuine questions about each other's strategies, and then arrive somewhere collectively that none of them could have arrived alone. In mathematical discourse, authority is distributed. Students are not reporting to the teacher. They are thinking with each other, and the teacher's role shifts from evaluator to facilitator, asking the questions that deepen the conversation rather than just providing answers that end it. Both of those things can look like students talking, but they're producing fundamentally different mathematical experiences. And the research on which one builds deeper understanding is not ambiguous. The research on mathematical discourse and student learning is some of the most robust in the field. Accountable Talk, the framework developed by Lauren Resnick and colleagues at the University of Pittsburgh, identified 3 essential features of high-quality mathematical discourse. Talk that is accountable to the learning community, meaning students are expected to listen to and build on each other's ideas. Talk that is accountable to accurate knowledge, meaning students are expected to support their claims with evidence and reasoning. and talk that is accountable to rigorous thinking, meaning students are expected to explain, justify, compare, and evaluate mathematical arguments rather than just report answers. When those three features are present in a mathematics classroom, the research shows consistently stronger conceptual development, stronger mathematical reasoning, and significantly higher engagement over time, particularly for students who have historically been excluded from high-level mathematical conversation. And then there's the work of Meehan on classroom discourse structures, which shows that the default pattern of most classrooms, what researchers call the IRE, initiate, respond, evaluate, actually suppresses the kind of thinking that builds deep understanding. Because in the IRE, the student's job is to produce the answer that the teacher already has. There is no genuine inquiry. There's no uncertainty. There's no mathematical risk-taking. And without risk-taking, the thinking stays shallow. What produces deep thinking is a different structure entirely. One where the question the teacher asks does not have a predetermined answer in the teacher's head, where the student's response opens a conversation rather than closing one, where the classroom genuinely does not know where the discussion is going to land. And that uncertainty, managed well, is exactly where mathematical thinking lives. So let me show you what the shift from discussion to discourse actually looks like and sounds like in practice, because I want to be really clear and I want this to be something that you can hear and not just understand. Discussion sounds like this. The teacher: what is the area of this rectangle? Student: 24 square units. Teacher: that's right. How'd you get that? The student: well, I multiplied 6 times 4. The teacher: good. And what formula did we use? That exchange is orderly, accurate, and mathematically empty. The student produced a correct answer and named a procedure. The teacher confirmed both. Nobody learned anything they didn't already know. Discourse sounds like this. Teacher: here are 2 rectangles with the same area. Does that mean they're the same? Student: no, because one is longer and then the other one is wider. Another student: but they have the same area, so they're kind of the same. The first student: but that doesn't make sense though, because if you were tiling a floor, they would fit totally differently. The teacher says, interesting. So what does having the same area tell us? And what doesn't it tell us? And now the classroom is doing mathematics. They're examining a relationship, surfacing a genuine mathematical idea. The difference between area and perimeter, between size and shape, through conversation, that started with a question that didn't have a simple answer. The second conversation is harder to manage. It requires a teacher to hold back, to resist the urge to correct or confirm, to let the uncertainty breathe long enough for the thinking to develop. And that's the discipline. And it's learnable, but it has to be taught explicitly, because most teachers were trained in environments that look like the first conversation. And the first conversation feels like good teaching right up until you examine what it's actually producing. If you are a classroom teacher, I want to offer you a concrete entry point into mathematical discourse this week. It's 2 words: say more. The next time a student gives an answer, correct or incorrect, say more, not why, because why can feel like an accusation, not can you explain, because explain could feel like a test. Say more is an invitation. It signals genuine curiosity. It keeps the student talking. And when the student keeps talking, you almost always learn something about their thinking that their initial answer never revealed. If you're a math coach, the shift from discussion to discourse is one of the most observable and most coachable instructional moves in mathematics education. When you sit in a classroom with a tally sheet that simply tracks who is talking, teacher or student, and what kind of talk is happening, reporting or reasoning, you have data that opens a professional conversation that no evaluation rubric can generate. Try it in your next visit. See what the numbers show and bring them to the debrief as a mirror. If you're an instructional leader, look at your professional development calendar. How much time is explicitly allocated to helping teachers develop skills of mathematical facilitation? Not content knowledge, not curriculum implementation, implementation, but the actual moves of facilitating genuine discourse. Because most teachers know they should have better discussions. Very few have been taught how. And that gap is a professional learning decision, not a teacher quality problem. And if you are a pre-service teacher, before your first lesson, write down 3 questions you could ask that do not have a single correct answer. Questions that invite comparison, that surface uncertainty, that open conversation rather than close one. Have them ready, because in the heat of the lesson, the default is always to ask the question that you already know the answer to. The questions worth asking are the ones you do not. And having them prepared before you walk in the door is the best way to make sure they actually get asked. So here are your Wednesday morning receipts. 3 things this week. 1, try say more every day this week. After every student responds correct or incorrect, partial or unexpected, say more. Just those 2 words. See what surfaces. See how the conversation changes when students know their first answer is never the last word. That practice alone will begin shifting your classroom from discussion to discourse. 2, design one genuinely open question. For one lesson this week, write a question for which you genuinely don't know what the students will say. A question that invites multiple, reasonable responses. A question where it depends is a legitimate and interesting answer. Post it, ask it, and then get out of the way. See where the class goes. See what mathematical thinking emerges when the question doesn't have a predetermined destination. And number 3, map the talk. For one lesson this week, have a colleague, a student teacher, or even just a notebook track who is talking and what kind of talk it is. Is the teacher doing most of the talking? Are the students reporting or reasoning? Are they talking to you or to each other? That map, even informal, even imprecise, will tell you more about the mathematical culture of your classroom than 100 lesson plans. And it gives you a starting point that is honest, specific, and yours. Here's what I want you to carry out of today. Your students talking is not the same as your students doing mathematics. And a classroom full of hands and responses and energy can be producing very little actual mathematical thinking. If what the students are doing is reporting to the teacher, rather than reasoning with each other. The shift from discussion to discourse is not about being less structured. It's about being more intentional, about designing the questions that open conversations, about building the culture where students know that their thinking, not just their answers, is what this room is here for, about trusting, finally, that the uncertainty is not a sign that the lesson is falling apart. It's a sign that the mathematics is happening. Next time on Show Me the Math Receipts, we're closing out this phase of the show with something personal, something that sits underneath almost every conversation we have had across these 16 episodes. So come back for episode 16. I'm Asali Smith. This is Show Me the Math Receipts. And until next time, teach boldly, protect student thinking, and always keep your math receipts.